Much, Leon, for that introduction, and thanks for asking me to come and speak this evening. So what I propose is that I will speak for a period of time, and then really we can get into discussion. So I think so everyone can have the opportunity to participate. So I'm just going to start my slides. Okay, so can you see the slides? The slides up, right? Okay. Right, so we're talking about coping with COVID, mental health and wellness. Right, so we had to be dealing with COVID since certainly March 2020. And from quite early on, the World Health Organization's regional director felt that it was really going to be causing quite a mental health crisis. I mean, in her area, we've been looking at the Americas, and that would be due to heightened stress, the use of drugs and alcohol during the months of lockdowns and stay-at-home measures. And inevitably, we would see a dramatic increase in depression, anxiety, psychosis, and persons having suicidal thoughts and plans. So not only would there be the pandemic due to COVID, but there would also be a sort of mental health crisis or pandemic as a result. But so before we look at that specifically though, our responses are really based on the sense that we experience stress. And so I think let's pause to have a look at what stress is, because stress is really our body preparing to help us as far as our bodies are concerned. It's like thousands of years ago, and the stress really is that a wild animal is coming to eat you. So if a wild animal is coming to eat you, you better run very fast, or you better be very strong to attack them. So things like our heart rate goes up, our blood pressure increases, our breathing increases because we're really preparing to do some physical activity. Digestion is disrupted because, you know, the body says, well, I can't bother with digesting that food because I have to run. So all of these things occur, and then we get away from the wild animal, we go and lie down under a tree, and everything goes back to normal. So if the stress is short-lived, we can easily recover. But if the stress goes on day after day, we're never escaping, there's always a threat, then our immune system becomes exhausted. And as a result of that, there are both physical and mental health issues that then arise. And so this is a situation we're in with COVID, where we're not having a chance to pause. And so we are quite run down, exhausted, and we will have, in addition to specifically COVID, we will also have other physical and mental health issues. Right, so what happens during restrictions? So as we would all have experienced, we have feelings of fear, worry, certainly feeling stress. And these are all normal responses to a threat, as I just explained, because as far as our bodies are concerned, it could be thousands of years ago, or it could be 2021. All it knows is there is a threat, I have to prepare. So it's normal and understandable that we're feeling fear during the COVID pandemic because we're under stress. And then we add to this the changes we've had to do in our daily lives as our movements are restricted. So life is not as usual. Then we add to that the sort of issues about vaccines, concerns about vaccines, and that's another stress, what to do about that. Therefore, when we are faced with these new realities, we have to look after our mental as well as our physical health. I mean, often we tend to think about, physical health, am I eating properly and so on, but we also have to pause and think about looking after our mental health as well. Right. So these are some of the responses then that can occur to persons affected. You can have feelings of loneliness and isolation. And certainly, I think we can all understand that. And I think we would all have experienced that. There's a fear of falling ill, specifically with COVID and dying. Fear of approaching health facilities. I mean, and this has been found all over the world, that persons are then fearful of seeking assistance, not because they're fearful of having COVID, but for their day-to-day medical concerns. They're fearful if they go to a health facility, that may be a place that's more at risk. And then there are the financial concerns, the downturn in the economy, fear of losing your job. Then there's feeling powerless in protecting loved ones, because, I mean, we can't see the virus. We can't say, okay, the virus is over there, don't go over there. You know, we don't know how to do the protection for the best. And then there's a fear of losing loved ones because of the virus. Then there's quarantine and isolation. And so you have to be separated off either to, well, the primary areas, Harrison Point and some of the other schools. Now we have some home quarantine, but even there's still sort of strict measures in place. And so there's a sense of being separated. So as a consequence of all of this then, our normal social networks break down, because even with dance, I mean, we go to dance class to dance, but we also go to dance class to interact with other fellow human beings. And these things we are not able to do. And so that does have an effect on us. And then with, especially at the times of the strict lockdowns, persons were at home more often than they would otherwise be. So, I mean, persons might have various activities outside of the home, but now that wasn't possible. And so everyone was in the same space. And again, all over the world, this has been found that there's been an increase in domestic violence, violence against children, spouses, partners, family members. And this has been directly related to the restrictive policies that have had to be in place for COVID. Then there's so much information about, but what do we trust? So many sources, it's sometimes difficult to know, you know, is this a credible source? Do I go by this? Oh, but something else has cropped up. Do I go by that? And then sometimes something crops up and you think, oh, that's reasonable. And then a disclaimer comes, oh no, forget that. That was not reasonable, or that wasn't to be trusted. And so remember, through all of this, we're running from this wild animal who's about to eat us. So all of this adds to our stress, and we're not getting a chance to lie down under the tree and recover. And so persons who have had existing mental health and substance use disorders are experiencing relapses and other negative outcomes, because they're also avoiding the health facilities, or may be unable to access their care providers, because both the psychiatric hospital and the Queen Elizabeth Hospital have had to assist in providing manpower to the various sites, and they've had to put in place policies to ensure that persons can remain safe and have an initial period of isolation when patients come to the hospital. And so that has slowed down their whole ability to sort of quickly treat persons and have a quick turnaround. And so we get relapses with persons with their ongoing mental health issues. And the same applies to physical health problems as well. It's recognized that person, say, with the chronic non-communicable diseases like diabetes and hypertension, who need to have sort of regular checks. Some of these regular checks are not occurring. And so we then have physical health problems arising that are not directly COVID. So there are all of those issues that we're dealing with, but we still have our normal day-to-day events to cope with as well. I mean, we're washing the dishes and the dish falls and breaks, you know, okay, let's just sweep that up. But now I'm under so much stress. It becomes a big issue, puts me in a bad mood going on to work. And then it's, snowballs. I shout at somebody and so it goes from there. So as well as our day-to-day events, we have the underlying background of the things caused by COVID. So while we might have been able to cope with our normal day-to-day events, even those now we're not able to cope with. So we can see then that with all of the ongoing stress, no break, then it tips over into things like depression, clinical depression, which is being depressed. We all get depressed, for a few days on end. But with clinical depression, it's depression going on continually for at least 2 weeks or more. And anxiety, we again all experience anxiety, but this is anxiety that's more crippling, that interferes with our ability to function. Psychosis is where the stress has reached the point where we're no longer kind of in touch with reality. We feel that things are happening, or we have thoughts that are out of keeping with reality. And unfortunately, suicidal thoughts can occur as a result of this relentless stress and feelings of depression. So this is in all ages, but it's been found to be even more so in young adults. I was reading something recently where, I can't remember which part of the world it was, but they found that sort of paradoxically, the elderly persons seem to be more able to cope in the COVID environment than young adults. And it was felt that maybe they had developed coping strategies over the years. So we thought it would be a short-term problem. I remember last year it was felt that, okay, by this year, we should be out of it. Now I understand the World Health Organization is saying, well, it's going to be all next year as well. So we thought that it would be a short-term problem, but it's lasting longer. And we're all exhausted, all approaching burnout. So I want to also pause to think specifically about children, because they're in their stages of development. Their brain is also in stages of development. And when we have major events like this, like a pandemic, it takes a toll on them, certainly. And so there's social aspects of their development that are being affected, emotional aspects, as well as academic aspects. Because schools had to do a, complete switch around to organize virtual schooling, with no preparation, nothing in place. It just had to be done rapidly. And so schools were struggling and still continue to struggle to teach students remotely. Because reality is that not all students have had access to digital equipment or to reliable connection at home, or as a parent told me recently, reliable electricity. So at their home, they have the equipment, they have the internet connection, but then they have been in an area that have had some periods of time where the electricity has been off. And so even though they have all those things, still can't do it because the electricity is off. And it's made parents into teachers. So parents have had to be present, especially for the younger children, to help them be able to negotiate through the online platform. And sometimes parents have their own work to do, and they have to be juggling between organizing the children and organizing their own work. And again, that's more stress on both the parents and on the children. And I was talking about the support system and the breakdown in social interaction. So children are disconnected from school, which is a major support system for them. And they miss the physical contact with their peers, which again is an important part of their psychosocial development. That's how they're learning how to interact with persons, so that when they're adults, they will also have appropriate interactions. At the moment, they're not getting that. And so there are already concerns about, what's going to be happening down the line with the persons who are children now. So we may have future higher rates of depression, addiction, and mental illness in general for the children who are in fact growing and developing right now. And then there are the delays that are leading to deficits in their education. Because though the virtual school, does do the job in terms of teaching the children, it's been found that there's still delays. It's not the same as face-to-face teaching. So what are some of the strategies with students to help them? So they need clear tasks and feedback. As I said, younger students will need quite a bit of support from their parents, although the parents themselves may, not everyone is completely tech savvy and may not be available. Also to keep an eye on screen time, because the screen needs to be at least a foot, preferably further away from the child's eye than a foot, so that they're not sort of constantly focusing in a very short distance. And it's important that they have breaks away from the screen as well. And correct posture during study, because when you're on a screen, you are in that sort of fixed position. If the child was doing face-to-face at school, they may reach across to talk to a friend in front or behind, or bend down to pick a pencil, or, there would have been more organized break times. So it's important to remember things like that, because again, they're children, they're growing, their brains are growing, but their body is also growing. And we need to ensure that that their posture is good, so they don't run into problems later. And they do need physical exercise breaks. Even with the restrictions, there's physical exercise that one can do in the home or in the yard. And this needs to be included. And I'm not sure that that's always formally included. I know, I think some schools were still trying to do a sort of games or PE session, even virtually. But we have to remember to have that in place. Okay, so that's the students. So what about some general strategies for the rest of us, for everybody else? First of all, it's normal to feel sad, distressed, worried, confused, scared, or angry during a crisis. So we have to cut ourselves some slack and recognize that we're all in the same situation, and it's normal to feel these emotions. I think if someone's feeling that, oh, it's perfectly fine, I'm not bothered at all, what are you worried about? That's nothing. Then I think I would be more concerned about that. So it's normal to feel these sorts of emotions. And it may help to talk to people that you trust, And I guess for everyone, you would have to determine who those persons are, because it's, again, there's so many sources of information, and one needs to sort of filter out, yeah, where these are the persons I will speak to because I feel comfortable. And keep in touch with family and friends. This may also fall into the persons you trust, through email, phone calls, and making use of social media platforms. Though we can't do the face-to-face, we can still keep in touch, and it's important to do that. So if you must stay at home or have to be in home for periods of time, then we still need to maintain a healthy lifestyle as best we can. So that includes having a proper diet, sleep, and remember, exercise can still take place at home. There's Zoom, and there's been dance on Zoom. So you can still exercise at home, or it's amazing what you can do within the house, because on mornings I get up and I jog up and down in the house. And when I look at my Fitbit thing there, you know, you can do like a mile or two, and it's all inside the house. So we have to remember, utilize the space inside the house if we can't go out as well. Now, the last item here on the slide, do not use alcohol or other drugs to try to cope, because we're feeling not great, there's the risk of self-medicating. And often we may think of self-medicating by using alcohol or other substances. But this, in the long run, doesn't help. It only makes us less able to cope, more depressed, and then starts another whole range of problems in addition. So no self-medication. And back to this credible information on how to take precautions. And this goes along with the next bullet, because it's balancing up. So you want to get information so that you know how to keep yourself safe. But at the same time, you don't want to spend, 24 hours a day glued to some news information, because you do need to give yourself a break from media coverage as well. I mean, tune in appropriately, but then also tune out, take a break, go outside and do some exercising, tune into your Zoom dance class, but do take a break from, 24-hour coverage of difficult news. And draw on skills that you've used in the past during difficult times to manage your emotions. And everyone may have different skills that they've used. It may be that, meditation is helpful, that you found that if you get up in the morning and do meditation, that sets your day. You may have sayings that are helpful, like this too shall pass. Some persons have found that if they say that, it reminds them that, don't give up at this point. You may be able to get beyond it. And another saying that someone told me just recently that I've actually found quite interesting to think about. The question is, how do you eat an elephant? And the answer is one bite at a time. So it's a reminder that even though something seems like unsurmountable, we're never going to get through this, let's just chip away a little piece at a time and we'll get there. So, it's using skills to help you get through this situation. And remember, there's always professional help, and it may be possible to do so virtually. In the same way that the schools had to quickly adjust to having virtual classes, not only psychiatry, but also in other aspects of medicine, have had to adjust very rapidly to virtual sessions. So there's telemedicine is now very available. And in some ways, it can be more engaging even than face-to-face, because if we were doing this session face-to-face, let's say it was possible, then we would all be wearing masks and we'd all be, 6 feet away from each other. I would have to be shouting to see who's way down the end. But with virtual, we are not wearing masks, so we can see our faces. You're right there, I can nearly touch you. So in some ways, the virtual platform has been quite helpful. Right, before finishing up, I just want to mention the whole mask issue. Because yes, we need to wear masks. Yes, it's very important, but it's also recognizing that seeing a mask gives us feelings of sort of fear and uncertainty, because it's a reminder of the threat that we're under. I mean, if you were even thinking, okay, well, I guess I'm feeling okay, and then you realize, oh gosh, I have to put on a mask, and all those persons are wearing masks. It's a reminder that everything is not okay. I had to go into town yesterday, and as I was walking along and seeing all the persons in masks, I'm thinking that's not how it would have been before. It was certainly to me a very strong reminder that this is not normal, and we're definitely not in normal situations. And I said the mask symbolizes the virus, and it's unseen, but it's there, and we're wearing the mask. And of course, seeing faces is an important part of our socialization, because not seeing faces removes that familiarity and connection. I remember in the early days when we just started wearing masks, going into the supermarket and, someone saying hello, and then I looking at them thinking, who's that person? And only when they said who they were, I said, oh gosh, because we didn't recognize a person with the mask on. I think we're probably getting a little bit better at that now, that we can find a way to recognize persons even with the mask. And I think we're also getting better at understanding emotion through our eyes, because, that's with the mask on, that's the only cue we have as to, how, what emotion is the person showing. So we don't have that familiarity and connection. So to finish up then, it's clear isolation is not good for humans, even when it's the right thing we need to do medically, and we understand that. But when we disconnect from others and from things that are beneficial in our life, human interaction, then we need to understand that our levels of anxiety, depression, and substance use may increase. Because no one has ever been through something quite like this. In, let's say, in modern times, there was a Spanish flu in the early 1900s, but, persons in the current time would not have been around then. So at first, no one really knew how to do it right. We were having to sort of work it out as we went along. But what I've found is a very important word is resilience. It's the ability to recover from setbacks and to keep going in the face of adversity. And resilience is really what we need to pull on at this point of time. At this point of time, remember eating the elephant. It's by resilience. I'm going to go just one bite at a time until the whole thing is eaten up. So resilience is important. And a way of thinking about resilience that I found helpful is to remember our ancestors, wherever they were from, however you want to think of them. Because if they didn't have resilience, we wouldn't be here now. So if they can be resilient, it's our time now to show our resilience so that we will have descendants who will thank us for our resilience now. So resilience is the key word. And remember that it's normal to feel scared. Right, so thank you, and keep dancing, albeit virtually, for the time being. Thank you.